Today we're going to be looking at a lot of people's dream gun. It is the CZ Shadow 2 Optic Ready. And while the Shadow 2 is a beast of a competition pistol, it's not without its flaws. So today we're going to be talking about the rock star of the IPSC and USPSA competitive circuit. It is the Shadow 2 Optics Ready. I'm David from the Humble Marksman channel. Are you ready? Stand by. So today we're talking about a superstar from the IPSC and USPSA world, and I do want to just throw out that there's a lot of people making videos on YouTube talking about what a competition gun should be who do not compete. If you're not familiar with my channel, I am a competitive shooter. I competed with the Shadow 2 iron sight version for a long time before switching divisions to carry optics. So all of the information that I'm going to share with you is actually accurate. Just be careful who you accept competition advice from, because it's an easy way to get disqualified or potentially bumped into open division. So you didn't hear me say that this was an IDPA competition gun, and the reason for that is it's just too darn heavy, because this bad boy is going to weigh well over the weight limit for IDPA. Unless you cut on this thing with a gunsmith, it's not going to make weight, and that's a shame because this gun is super pleasant to shoot. A couple more housekeeping things before we dive right in, guys. YouTube is making it harder to monetize these kinds of videos. Anything that's optics ready or whatever, you notice there's no dot on the gun. This is what it looks like in my hand, and this is what it looks like on the manufacturer's website. This is a totally unmodified gun down to the grips. Everything is totally stock with it, and that's because YouTube doesn't let you monetize videos on modified guns, but the guys who review the videos don't know what a modified gun looks like. So I'll be doing a second video on the optics mounting system. The gun won't be modified in that video either, but that one will probably be demonetized. If you watch this video within the first 24 hours, just check back in a day. If not, there's a card floating by, you can watch it. And only cry about that because this is a $1,500 pistol that I did purchase just to make a video for you guys with. So while you get done playing the world's smallest violin, I just need to throw that out there that I need it to be an ad-friendly video. But if you like what I'm doing, you can check out my Patreon where there's more exclusive content over there, and it helps me buy things like this to make videos for you guys. And before going even further, I do need to talk about, like, the Shadow 2 is the double action, single action version of the gun for competition shooting. That's significant because a lot of people will want to modify it to be single action only. If you want single action only, that is the Tactical Sports gun. Check that out. It is a pretty awesome gun as well. But this is intended to be a double action, single action, and in competition, you have to start with the hammer fully decocked. So it is a double action pull and then the slide cycles, and then you have a single action pull that is much lighter. And the reason I bring that up is because if you keep the hammer all the way down, like if you were to use this as a carry gun, as some of you crazy cats like to do, please don't carry it with the hammer all the way down. At least put it into quarter cock mode like that, because if the gun falls and lands on the hammer with the hammer fully decocked, the inertia from such a heavy frame can cook off the round in the chamber and send a round up. So if you choose to carry this gun, and I would discourage you from doing so, it's a beautiful competition gun, but it's a boat anchor and it doesn't have a firing pin block. So with all that stuff out of the way, we can jump right into kind of the experience of when you first pick up the gun. So starting with the box, the gun is going to be traditional CZ fare with the traditional CZ hard case. It's the same box the regular Shadow 2 comes in, which is to say that it's not robust enough to potentially want to travel with. It's perfectly suitable for storing your guns, but if I had a $1,500 gun with a very expensive optic mounted, I'd want something a little more robust to travel with the gun in. And to that point, you couldn't really travel with this gun, and this is going to be the first flaw. It's very small, but the foam cutout in the case does not account for an optic, so you cannot put this gun back in the original case with the optic mounted. A super minor gripe, to be certain, but one nonetheless. Once you get the gun out of the box, you're going to be honestly impressed with the gun. The ergonomics on the Shadow 2 are honestly second to none. This gun feels like it was custom made for your hand. The checkering at the heel of the gun and the front strap of the gun are honestly probably the best on a production pistol. The iron sights that come on the gun are fantastic, very good. The front sight blade might be a little bit fat for some people, but it worked just fine for me when I used to compete with it. Now, if you're not used to CZs or metal guns in general, you're gonna pick up the Shadow 2 and just be kind of like blown away with what it feels like to rack a gun that has a metal frame. It's gonna feel like a much higher quality gun. And to that point, when I first started taking the gun apart to clean it and mess with the slide and all that good stuff, the slide to frame fit is improved from what the Shadow 2s that I used to compete with are now. Like, I had to pull the slide off the front of the gun because it was so tightly fit. which is pretty amazing for a production gun. So the gun is super well fit. It has a very high quality feel. Like, you will have no doubt in your mind as you hold this gun that you are handling a $1,500 pistol. It might actually be worth it. When you get onto the trigger, it is a double single action trigger. And honestly, out of the box, guys, the trigger's just kind of okay. And I say that on the full spectrum of what triggers are. It's not gonna be like an amazing glass rod breaking single action like you would get on like a 2011, but it is going to be probably better than most striker fired guns that are out there. The double action trigger, as you get onto it, is gonna have a lot of hitches and starts. It's not gonna be the smoothest thing ever. If you just keep shooting the gun, that will smooth out with time, but the double action pull is gonna start around 9 pounds, and the single action pull is gonna be kind of just north of about 3 pounds. The single action trigger, you pull up through a tiny little bit of take up and then you're on the wall. There's a tiny little bit of creep as the trigger sets a little bit further back, so there's almost like 2 walls on the trigger. And then right now I'm on the actual wall for the trigger. I keep building up pressure and then the hammer will release. And there's a very tiny amount of over travel, and the reset, as you can see, it's a little bit longer than I would honestly like it to be. And amongst the competition crowd, that is one of the things that they like to change about the guns, is to get the reset to be a little bit shorter. The actual grips that come on the pistol are these beautiful blue grips. Like, I love these blue aluminum grips. If you're not familiar with kind of metal framed guns, the profile of these grips is gonna help people of all hand sizes get good access onto the trigger. And that's a big deal, because if the double action stroke with the trigger all the way down, it is a pretty long trigger reach. So people with medium to even small hands are gonna have a harder time pulling the double action trigger on this gun. The safeties, because it's intended to be shot in double action only mode, are super thin. I mean, they are ambi, but you can pretty much ignore them. Like, if you actually do intend to use the safeties, like if it were a limited gun or something, like, you can do it, you can swipe them off easily enough, you can activate them a little bit, but it's really easy to ignore them, and that's honestly why they put the thin safety blades on there. The ergos of the gun are incredible, as discussed. The checkering at the back of the gun and the front strap, like, I'm pretty sure nobody's doing it as well as CZ is. Like, the gun gets planted in your hand, it feels great. They relieved the trigger guard with the Shadow 2 versus the old SPO1 Shadow, so it sits a little bit deeper in your hand. You've got a great beaver tail that kind of flows your hand up into the gun, and it really does a good job of helping you understand how the gun is meant to be gripped so that you get a good grip on the pistol. Like, a lot of Glocks have that stupid thumb depression in the middle of the grip, so people hold their thumbs like this, whereas the CZ, with the way the beaver tail works, makes you want to have kind of a high thumb, making a nice pocket for your support hand to come in and get on the recoil management. The mag release has a paddle on it that is adjustable into 3 positions, so you can make sure that it doesn't interfere with your grip and you aren't inadvertently dropping magazines when the gun recoils. Speaking of magazines, they're gonna come with 3 19-round magazines if you live in a free state, or I'm sure you guys in restricted states will get 10-round magazines just like always. But in USPSA carry optics, you're constrained to a magazine length of 141 millimeters. The magazine provided with the gun are significantly shorter than that, and honestly don't hold enough rounds to be competitive in the division, because most people are getting 22 to 23 rounds in their guns, and this is just going to have 19. So if you're planning on competing, this is at a detail you're going to have to look at. But the nickel-plated magazines are a super premium feature, and I think it does sort of substantiate the price of the gun over the regular model. I don't know if the regular iron-sighted Shadow 2s are coming with nickel-plated mags now or not. They weren't when I bought mine back in the day, but this is a nice touch. These are the preferred magazines. That said, if you wanted to buy the nickel-plated mags, they're like 40 to 50 bucks. So they're not cheap magazines, but they are super high quality. The actual shooting experience, if you've never shot a Shadow 2, you're gonna be convinced that it makes you a better shooter, but it's not making you a better shooter. The ergonomics that we talked about are going to give you a good grip on the pistol. That intuitive frame design, this is one of the best frames people are making in the game right now. So most people who don't have formal training are going to grip the gun properly right out of the box, which makes a big difference. The other thing that makes a big difference is this super heavy dust cover. So if you don't know how to lock your wrists out and return a gun to where the front sight lifted from, Good news, the super heavy dust cover is going to flop it out of recoil for you, no problem. So if you start pulling the trigger in anger at cardboard targets, you're going to feel like a shooting god because the gun is going to be super steady. This will be your magic bullet hose of which you dispense justice at your cardboard foes, and all will be right in the world. The super heavy dust cover does make it very easy to line up like difficult shots. That's where the heavy dust cover really helps. When you're trying to take your time and actually get great sight pictures, the heavy weight of the gun really becomes something that you appreciate because it recovers from recoil a little bit faster. That said, if you're used to shooting plastic framed guns, this is a steel framed gun, and as a result, you don't lose any of the energy of recoil through the frame wiggling and compressing. So all of the energy is going to come straight into your hand. While we're dispelling rumors and you are yelling at me in the comments, we'll go ahead and throw out another thing. CZs are not low bore axis guns while we are at it. So right there is where the barrel is on this gun. It has a short slide, but it is not low bore axis. Glocks are significantly lower bore axis than a CZ. CZs are honestly kind of run-of-the-mill as far as hammer-fired guns are concerned, and bore axis, but it doesn't really matter anyway. But in spite of that, the gun shoots brilliantly, so I'm not too upset about what the bore axis of the pistol is. And it's at this point in the video where I need you to go ahead and bang on that like button and subscribe if you haven't done so already, because I'm going to start to get into the things that I don't like about the pistol. And that's going to be the point at which you yell at me and call me a fanboy of whatever brand you think I'm a fanboy of. So I look forward to seeing that, so be sure and call me a fanboy in the comments now. This is true about all CZs, not just this particular gun, but the Shadow platform requires preventative maintenance to work. And what I mean by that is there are two pieces in this gun that can break while you're at the range and give you a bad day. Now, the good news is it takes a significant amount of ammo or dry fire to break these two pieces. The first piece that can break is the trigger return spring. So the spring responsible for allowing the trigger to swing forward like that can break and this trigger won't swing forward. It'll just stay dead at the back of the gun. You can still push the trigger forward, but if it snaps, that's probably why. And how you break that is just honestly pulling the trigger in double action. If you only shoot single action only and never really get into it, then you're not gonna have that part break on you. But about a 10,000 round, if you're doing dry fire and live fire, about 10,000 rounds is a good time to change that spring out. It's like a $5 spring. It's not that big a deal. It's kind of fiddly to get at with punches and stuff, but once you know how to do it, it's not that big a job to take on. The next piece that breaks, and they honestly improved this on the Shadow 2 versus the old Shadows that I used to compete with, is the slide stop is a sacrificial piece and will break eventually. At some point, the gun is going to lock to the rear like mid-magazine when the mag's not empty, and you're gonna wonder why, or it's gonna hang like slightly out of battery, whatever. That usually is an indication that you've broken the slide pin. It's a $45 part. You probably wanna change it on an interval of about 25,000 rounds. With the Shadow 2 on the old CZs, it was about a 10,000 round part. So every 10,000 rounds, you take the old slide pin out and put it in your bag as a backup and put a new one in, and life would go on. Now, the trigger return spring has been a thorn in the CZ platform side since forever. I desperately wish that they would fix it, but they would have to fundamentally change their design in order to fix it. Those are both fairly minor gripes about the pistol, since a lot of people aren't going to shoot their gun enough to have either one of those parts fail. The next gripe is it's called an optics ready gun. So if you get the gun out of the box and you decided to put an optic on it, you can't. Before you can put an optic on the gun, you have to buy an optics plate, and this is the CZ actual optics plate, which is unobtainium in the United States. So you're like, oh, I'll just go buy the optics plate from the CZ USA web store, and this is one of those items that you sign up to be notified when it's back in stock, and by the time you get to your computer, they're all out of stock again. Like, that's what these plates are. So I had to buy mine from some European company that shipped it to me in about 10 days. And this is the genuine article optics plate that you need to mount an RMR on the gun. So while the gun is billed as being optics ready, it's almost like it's just optics capable, because there's nothing ready about it. And considering the purchase price of the gun for $1,500 to get the gun and then want to go mount your optic and start racing, like if you didn't plan for it and buy the optics plate prior to buying the gun, you gotta wait like 2 weeks before you can mount an optic on the gun. Now, there's no shortage of aftermarket parts you can buy from the aftermarket CZ gunsmiths. out of aluminum rather than steel, which is what the genuine part is made out of. But I don't really like threaded aluminum optics plates. Like, you can pull the threading loose on those plates. And while that sounds crazy, you're like, well, that has never happened to me. Like, well, my buddy Rob actually had his optic jump off his gun, and he managed to shoot the glass out of a Delta Point Pro that jumped off of his Shadow, which was milled with an aluminum optics plate. So yeah, I like steel optics plates, and they're very difficult to get, which is, in my opinion, the biggest flaw of this Shadow 2 experience. So at this point, you're probably frothing at the mouth and calling me all the bad words that you know if you're still watching the video at all. But I do want to end on a happy note. I have sold 2 Shadow 2s when I moved on and thought I didn't need Shadow 2s back in my life. Shooting this pistol again has reminded me just how amazing this platform is. Like, this pistol is going to stay with me forever. If I go back to carry optics division, this very well might be the gun that I end up competing with. There are so many holster options and everything else, but more important than that, like, the gun is legitimately very, very easy to shoot well. It returns from recoil well. It is super accurate. It's just an amazing, amazing gun. I'm not selling this one. It's gonna stay in my forever collection, if you want to call it that. It's a truly special gun. Like, the Shadow 2 is the most popular gun for a reason. It is a truly remarkable gun. So again, if you've made it this far, please do go ahead and hit that like button. YouTube has picked this video for you to watch, and just for gigs, I've put the old Shadow 2 video where you can look at me with a mustache for Movember, which was absolutely ridiculous. I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, guys.